So I'm sitting here kind of reflecting on a lot of things that have happened recently over this last eclipse season that we just had pass by. And one of the really fascinating and interesting things that I was watching happen is a cycle that I had played out 8 years ago in my world came in and repeated itself. And 8 years ago, when this situation had happened to me, this exact moment, I went into this place of complete chaos. And so I'm in a pickup truck driving down the highway at 140 kilometers an hour. The rain's like coming down so hard that it's not even safe to really drive out there. There's this storm that's brewing, and as I remember this now, I see how I was creating that storm with my energy, right? And I was weaving in and out of traffic just in this like crazy rush hour, looking for the right semi to finish everything off with. Because in that moment, all my soul could think about was getting off of this fucking planet. And I know I'm not the only person who goes through this. One of our exit strategies tends to be getting out of this planet. And suicide is one of those easy ways for us to do it. So we have those triggers come up in our world to ask us if we're ready to step out or keep moving. And so that whole situation takes place. I get to a place where whatever, I'm off the road. I've gone back home at one point. And then I spent the next 3 weeks in a hospital. And this was the beginning of my spiritual journey. This was that breaking point where there was no other option but rebuild. And so as I have this past eclipse season come forward and have this same scenario replay itself, showing this cycle coming full circle, I spent that weekend and this last week here, since everything's been building up, pulling emotions out of my field and sending back everything that wasn't mine, and seeing how I needed to release the weight of these stories that I had written in my field tied to my father. And because I hadn't fully released these cycles, I was still drawing in masculines who represented what he did in this lifetime. So everything that he showed me, these masculines were coming in and replicating this situation. And so coming full circle 8 years later, instead of trying to jump out of body, instead of spending 6 months in just complete misery, I really sat with it, felt it, and then I used those tools that I've been building over this last 8 years. I pulled those emotions, and every time those emotions came up, I felt them, I let them release, I allow myself to grieve through it in those moments that they show up. And if it takes 10, 15 minutes, if it takes an hour worth of just sad songs to just like pour that grief out, I allow whatever needs to come up, but then I also come back. And so in part of that moment this weekend, after going through some grief, after moving some energy and tracking and again using those tools that I've built, that I have for myself, the crows show up in my yard and start calling me outside. And so I'm seeing all of these revelations tied to this father, and this is really important. This is a big thing that's showing up for many of the people around me. And so when that's happening, it's likely happening to a large amount of the collective. We have a lot of father wounding for the masculine's mother wounding, and for the feminine's mother wounding, but this is tying to the masculines, that father right now, to the feminines, because of this collapse in what is true divine union with counterparts, rather than just these karmic relationships coming forward, creating more chaos and more traumas. We have these relationships come in that replicate what we're experiencing from childhood. So my father, once my mom left my dad, he chose another family, another woman over us. And that's a very simplified version, obviously. There's a lot more to the story, but this is that basic storyline that's trying to show itself. So we have this abandonment, but this betrayal, right? And that not being chosen. And not being chosen because of another feminine. And so throughout my life, while I'm bringing in relationships into my world, there was this constant pattern of my masculine in my world at that time choosing other women over me, recreating that story that my dad didn't choose me. And so that energy goes into those relationships, right? Because we assume it's their fault for not loving us. But in truth, they hold contracts saying, I will be the mirror to help you heal. And being triggered by these betrayals, these abandonments, whatever your circumstances are, being triggered by it is giving you that opportunity to heal it. And so Charlotte 8 years ago didn't have that knowledge. And I can see that we're about to experience a large amount of people going through this process. And I feel like that's why this story is coming forth today. I am literally like in the bath and I was thinking about this and I was literally told like, you just have to do it right now. Because I wouldn't do it if I didn't just do it while I'm thinking about this. But it's important right now because we're about to watch and witness a large amount of people go through this as they go through this grief, which is why we felt a lot of that grief energy in the air. If the clips didn't come in and affect you in that way to cause some grief, to shake things up, you may not have felt it as deeply, but you could feel that underlying collective energy of it. But it's also to show how far we've come, right? It's not just about that rock bottom from before. It's about seeing how we didn't know what that story meant back then, and that's why we were so triggered. And the more I've done this work and cleared my field, when these circumstances come up, it's like being able to take something that once took me, I mean, we're, solidly 3 to 5 years before I was pulling out of some of my triggers, but, really it's up until today that I'm starting to really finally heal these things. Instead of letting it take me out for months and months, I sat with my people, my friend group, and I let them work with me and show me these things I needed to see. And this is really important moving forward for all of us, to really start learning how to not let these circumstances completely wipe us out. We have to see that this human emotion that we're getting caught in is a lot of fourth dimensional traumas that are keeping us stuck in these loops, these blockages that are coming to the surface. These emotions are triggering things that you don't want to look at, but they're not as big and bad and scary as you think they are. There's something that we can pull apart quite easily if you're willing to just be open and forgive yourself and forgive the other people involved. And so while we deal with these circumstances in front of us, we have to really look at what that means for us and where we need to go from here to keep elevating, because we have a whole wave of people that are about to experience what we did. And maybe your journey wasn't from 8 years ago. Maybe it was only 2 years ago that you started this. Maybe it was 20 years ago. But the more you go through this, the more you see that truth. And so in healing this father wound, and same with the mother wound, right? And actually, interesting enough, is my mother was part of these relationships I'm bringing in. So my father attracts narcissists, my mother being one, and my stepmom, my once upon a time stepmom also is one, has those narcissistic tendencies. And so in those masculines, we were also bringing that in. So we're almost bringing both parents in. So that can be something else as well that you might see. And so it's important to look at these patterns, right? Where are we drawing in feminine girlfriends that are representative of how mom treated us? Is there that abandonment trait there? Is there emotional abuse there? And is that what we're drawing in? Because that's what we need to heal in ourselves to move forward. And a lot of that self-worth stuff is coming up over this last few weeks, and it's very important. Because if we don't see that worth, we're just going to keep reattracting these situations, no matter how much Akashic records you pull out. If you still keep recreating that story in your field, and this is a big thing that's showing up right now, is if we keep allowing ourselves to recreate these stories, then it's going to continue to repeat, and we're still going to draw those people in. And so going for that walk this week, when the crows showed up, they showed me everywhere I needed to go. And I just walked and I followed them, and every time I needed to change directions, they would show up and show me. And I climbed this hill that when I moved out here from Saskatchewan, and I was really carrying the burdens of all those Akashics, all those ancestral lines, all of that trauma, hills defeated me. And so my goal has been to shift that perspective and shift that. And so even though I was in this moment of grief and all I wanted to do was just kind of stay at home and be sad, that call to go outside and follow those crows was so important, because it was retraining how I was going to restart this cycle. And so instead of allowing myself to sit in that real deep darkness, I'm choosing to shift that narrative, find new ways to do things. Let that grief come up as it needs to in that moment, but then pushing forward, right? So this is kind of something important that I think we all need to look at right now and allow ourselves to start healing that, because this is how we're going to start healing that union, healing that karmic relationship, those karmic loops that keep patterning over and over. And think about the fact that we have all these contracts with these people trying to show us and mirror to us who or what we need to shift in our field. But while we're not healing that and they're not healing that, everybody's still stuck without their person, still looping the same cycle without that proper union, without that true love that's causing us to shift this dynamic and this reality of power over power, where there's one in charge, one's the submissive. We have to change this narrative and allow that divine union to be where we're both whole. And so if we're constantly chasing those karmic partners trying to prove to ourselves that we're right, that men will always abandon us, or women will always emotionally abuse us, or whatever it is your story is that you play out in these relationships. And it doesn't just have to be romantic, so if this isn't resonating in a romantic sense, then take it how it is resonating, right? You're recreating a story right now. What is it? Pay attention to that. See your worth and know that you deserve better than what you're placed in. And how can you change this narrative to see things from a new perspective, to stop drawing in those same people over and over and over again. It's about seeing where you're drawing them in. And it's triggering. Don't get me wrong. I avoided my dad's stuff. I worked on everything with mom for a long time over this last little while because it's all my mom's stuff. But a lot of it ties to my dad too, and it's stuff that there's that avoidance of, right? But those triggers, these things that I'm hitting on, this father stuff is catapulting me so much faster than any of that mom shit did. And the mom shit definitely needed to be moved too. That's not the case. However, every time my girlfriend brought up dad in a circumstance where she's like, oh, where's your dad coming this? I'm like, he doesn't. It's fine. Everything's fine. Because those were big things that I didn't want to look at. And I'm about to step into something really big right now, which is why this trigger came back. And that's that other thing that I'll leave here too, is when we're about to go through something really big, I'm about to step into something that I've been dreaming about and knowing about. It's been coming for a long time. And so the easiest way to stop me from stepping into that mission and stepping into this next role in my life is to repeat a cycle that I once tried to kill myself for, right? And so when we get hit with these really big triggers where we're just like, why? Another part of it is also showing us where we're about to step over the precipice of something major, and there's interference coming in, whether it's your ego, whether it's contracts, whether it's bindings, curses, black magic. It could just be, cords tied to somebody that's not going with you, so they're trying to hold you back. There's so many things that it can be. That's why it's important to start working with these tools, right? And finding these tools for yourself so that you can see where those things are holding you back. Because if I would have allowed that to take me out, I would have went down a dark 6-month cycle. And you know it in your own world right now too. If you're going through things and you want to take yourself out, or creating these exit strategies, or reaching for your typical addictions, whether it's food and the TV, or like drinking or drugs or sex, right? Whatever that addiction is that comes in to just avoid whatever this trigger is, look at that, right? Because that's something trying to take you out right now, because you don't believe that you're worthy of getting this amazing opportunity that's trying to show up for you. These things aren't here to actually stop you, and it doesn't mean you haven't learned your lessons. Maybe it's asking you, hey, did you learn from this? Are you willing to be like, oh, fuck no, we ain't doing that again? Or are you going to get lost in it and be like, wow, how could this happen to me? What does this mean? Obviously, there's still something wrong with me. What if it's not about you at all? Start looking at this whole picture now. We can't get lost in that illusionary storyline, because we have 100 different timelines playing on top of themselves. And if we can't sort them timelines out and step over them and collapse them, we're getting distorted messages. This is why it's important to start feeling your field, checking in why you're triggered, getting those sessions. You know why you're feeling drawn to me? Because I can pull some shit out of you that'll help you start seeing things. I can give you that guidance that whatever perspective you're requiring, it shows up in that session to be like, listen, this is why you feel this way. This is what it is. Let's pull this apart. Here's what's required now. So if you're feeling that call, like, I should just do it. Why are you stopping yourself? Because that again is that precipice of blocking yourself, not believing you're worthy of that change. I have a lot of clients that have done that in over this 8 years, right? Where they'll book a session and cancel, book a session and cancel, because they're not believing that they're ready for that change. And maybe they aren't. Maybe I don't have the codes. And maybe they're holding themselves back and self-sabotaging. So are you self-sabotaging? Pay attention to that. Know that you're worthy of that and go and get that session, even if it's not with me. Are you feeling called to a mentor again right now? Where like it feels like they have some information for you, some codes. Go. Message them, reach out, get those codes, because it's going to help you quantum leap. Everything we're doing right now is quantum leaping. So which direction are you leaping? Okay, I'm going to end this here because I will just keep going on new topics over and over again. So there's a lot of stuff to think about here. And I want you to know that you will get through this if you're going through that really hard time, right? If things came in that were so unexpected that you just feel like you were going to die from them, I feel you. And it's not the end of the world, even if it feels like it is. And there's tools out there for you to get better. So reach out and get what it is that you are being drawn to right now. Get out in nature. Take care of yourself. Let go of these situations and take it easy. And I will chat with you guys again soon. Take care.